Support for CFO Thought Leader comes from Brex and Anrock, one tax engine for your global sales.
Hello, this is Sarah Elper. I'm the CFO of Pactum AI, and you are listening to the CFO Thought Leader Podcast.
This is episode 1072.
One of my favorite moments was when I was named CFO of the New York Stock Exchange. I got this call from my dad. And my dad was a career CPA, like original Arthur Andersen, had his own practice, total number guy. And he called me, he said, let me understand this. You were just named the CFO of the New York Stock Exchange. I said, yeah. That it's not just about being clinical with numbers, right? It's about being strategic.
Hi, it's Jack. On today's show, we speak with Amy Butte, CFO of Navan. We speak to her about those formative experiences, of course, that she believes helped prepare her for a CFO role. But we also ask her to narrow her lens for us on that transition into the CFO role at the New York Stock Exchange and what that experience was like in terms of the cultural transformation that was underway there. We also discuss strategies and capital expansion plans at Navan, particularly around a potential IPO in 2025, and how Navan is leveraging its AI and machine learning capabilities to further enhance the travel experience of its customers. We'll talk about all that and much more on today's episode. We'll begin after this. Hello, we're speaking with Amy Butte, CFO of corporate travel and expense platform, Navan. Amy has had multiple CFO career chapters, including at the New York Stock Exchange and MF Global. She transitioned NYSE into a public company. How do you like those apples? Along the way, she's been appointed to numerous boards shaping corporate policies and risk management strategies. At Navan, her focus is on strategic growth and operational efficiency. Amy, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Jack.
So, Amy, we'd like you to look back to the early days of your finance career for a moment. And we're always looking for those experiences that seem to have been formative for a finance leader. What would those be for you?
Well, for some reason, the route of my career has always been about the public markets, or it has been a route to the public markets, whether it was understanding how investment managers made investment decisions in public stocks, how trades were routed from one place to the other in terms of the public markets. But I've had the fortune of serving as a banker, an equity research analyst, a CFO, and a board member, all in kind of really the support of what does it mean to be a public company? What's that difference? So I guess my highest impact role was CFO of the New York Stock Exchange, which you mentioned. Had the pleasure of being there when it went from private to public and not for profit to for profit. And I have to tell you, every day when I walked into that building, I felt like I was walking into history, right? I was going from seeing how people did things in the past to imagining how could it happen in the future. And you really did feel like you were making a difference. The company itself really wasn't that big, right? We actually spent time speaking to the SEC to convince the SEC that we weren't really a monopoly. We were one piece, an equity piece of a larger capital market structure. And so it's really interesting that people always viewed us as the biggest and the best. And we're actually really small. We were in a world where competitors had 20 billion plus in market cap. And little secret, we only had $1 billion in cash on the balance sheet. And so it was really a difference of thinking about old, new, past, present, and really kind of thinking ahead. My biggest takeaway, although from the New York Stock Exchange, wasn't just the history. it was also realizing that I had an opportunity to be a CFO for CFOs, right? And that we would gather the best and the brightest at the exchange to talk about issues, to learn about them, to ask them their needs. And what I learned is that while CFOs are generally seen as experts, that doesn't mean that they aren't also craving data or community to make themselves smarter. And so it was really that understanding that CFOs are often alone within an organization or viewed as the expert. And if you can create a community of CFOs for CFOs, that way personally you're creating connections and you're also creating value.
Did you like, way back when, your earliest years, did you like being a financial analyst? Did you take to finance as you seem to have? Was it that easy? Was it a perfect fit? What were your thoughts?
Well, when I left college, I had no interest in going to to investment banking or being in finance. And actually, my first job was in management consulting. Within 6 months, they laid off a third of the workforce. I was one of them. It was really a square peg in a round hole. And not many people know this, Jack, but at the time, I was viewed as a technologist, and Microsoft was recruiting people to come to this place called Seattle. And I said, wait, I don't want to go to Seattle. I want to stay in New York. But if I stay in New York, I better get to Wall Street because that's really a meritocracy. And so that was the reason that I focused on a career path to get to Wall Street, that was a fit for me. And no, I never expected at that moment in time.
Now, you're someone who I think I mentioned you have multiple board seats, board appointments over time. I'm curious again, as that young person, when did you get your first exposure to C-suite executives? During those Wall Street days, perhaps you were asked to step into a conference room, and there they were, the CFO and the CEO across the table from you. When you think back, your early reflections on those people and the responsibilities they had, what occurs to you now, those early observations, and how over time you entered that boardroom and took, a seat in your own right? What will you share with us?
What a great question. So the moment that comes to me is when I was in business school. I was a summer associate at Merrill Lynch. I was on the trains, planes, and automobile team, which was called the red team in the day. And irony of irony, I was assigned to the first Sabre Group IPO, and we were a co-manager. And so I would travel to Texas at least once a week and help do due diligence. We were a co-manager, so it was okay to send a summer associate to represent the bank in those days. And I remember being in the room with the CFO of the Sabre Group, the CEO, all of these really important senior bankers, and they were talking about something. And I just had this pit in my stomach, like, wait, I have a question. And nobody else asked a question. And I was like, why isn't anybody asking this question? Because they were talking about at the time, what's the dependency of the Sabre Group on American Airlines revenue? And so there I was, a summer associate. And people can't see me on this podcast, but imagine that I'm kind of slowly raising my hand to ask a question. And my heart is beating. And I asked the question, I said, so what percentage of the revenue comes from American Airlines now that you're being spun out? And is that a risk? And he actually threw out a number that everyone in the room just gasped. And it was at the next break that everybody came up and said, that's a really good question. And I think that was a great example of when you have a good intuition because you've done your homework and you aren't afraid to ask that question of anybody, you can really be validated and respected for that. And I think that really set me off on a career of knowing that if I did my homework and I had conviction, whether it was a question or whether it was a statement, that I was comfortable in that role.
Can you help us understand how the New York Stock Exchange opportunity came your way? I always like to ask: is it a recruiter? Was it your network? How did this is a great operational chapter for any CFO, and wow, it came your way. Tell us a little bit about that.
It was all the network. um, I I had one CEO tell me, he said, Amy, when you know what you want to do, you're going to be networked to be able to do that. And gave me the confidence that even though I didn't know at that moment what I wanted to do, it would come along. And it was at the time that the changes were taking place, that Dick Grasso was leaving, new management was coming in. I was known as someone who was on the forefront of talking about trading technology. I knew traders, I knew portfolio managers, I knew CEOs. And when that change started to happen, I reached out to a friend of mine and I said, hey, do you think the new CEO would be interested in talking to me? And he said, yeah, I'll get you a meeting. And I think it was a couple days later and I had the meeting and I walked into John Thane's office and he said to me, how'd you like to be the CFO of the New York Stock Exchange? Not what I was expecting at all. And I asked him what I thought was a good question. I said, what does it mean to be the CFO of the New York Stock Exchange? And he said, well, it's a really simple business. We're going to take the company public in 5 years, and I'm going to change all the people. And I was like, well, that's great. And we continued the conversation, and I decided to say yes. Ultimately, though, Jack, I will tell you, it wasn't a simple business. We needed to do the deal in half that time, in about 2.5 years. And he didn't change most of the people, so that I kind of became that agent of change. And that's not uncommon for a CFO to be the agent of change.
Can you reflect a little on the culture that you first, upon your arrival versus when you left? It was quite a transformation for such a unique entity.
Yeah, I mean, also, also a really good question. I would say the culture on the floor with the traders and the markets was different than the culture internally.
Uh,
And what was fascinating about the internal culture is that publicly they were being told that they had done things the wrong way, right? Dick Grasso took too much money. They weren't enhancing the markets. They were taking a lot of public criticism. But if you sat down with the people in the organization, they were like, we don't understand. We were told that our targets were X and that we were doing a good job. And now all of a sudden the tides have shifted and we're being told that we were wrong, right? They were doing what they were supposed to do in being a not-for-profit, right? They were protecting the members and the market share of the members. They were doing what they were told to do in terms of spending money, not spending money, building a business in that construct. And so the big shift was really saying, hey, you were right in this construct, but guess what? That construct is shifting because when you have to act like a public company, when you are a public company, there are different responsibilities that come with it. I used to have a saying that even though we weren't public at the time, because we were asking our listed companies to operate at public company standards, we should do the same. And it's kind of like when you shift from, blue colored glasses to yellow colored glasses, you want to make sure that you take one off and you put another one on and you don't end up with a funny shade of green. And so it was very hard for a lot of people internally to say, hey, I was doing something right, but now you're asking me to work in a whole new paradigm.
We'd love to understand better as you become a frequent board member. What have the mindset of a board member versus a CFO? Can you reflect a little on that for us?
Sure. Well, there is a difference between being a director and which is really a fiduciary for shareholders, and being an operator. And I think it's really important to know that difference. It's not the audit chair or the board's job to produce the financials. or manage the controls within the systems and processes. But oversight of where is their risk? Are you asking the right questions? Are you providing the support and resources that are needed? It can be a fine line, and some people have a hard time um, acknowledging that. For me, I really appreciate what it means to be a director, and I also appreciate the added responsibility that comes as an operator.
Well, thank you for that. We will have perhaps a few more career-related questions for you a little later in the podcast, but right now we'd like to find out about Navan. What sets this company apart? What's it about?
So Navan is the travel and expense platform for frequent travelers, right? And actually, if you think about expenses within a company, travel can often be a top 5 or a top 3 line item in any company's expense ledger. And so it's an important thing to pay attention to before you travel, not just after. So what Navan does is we make frequent travelers happy. Sounds kind of funny to say that, but we make people happy because we remove the pain points that are acutely felt by road warriors as well as companies and CFOs. So when you think about road warriors, this is exactly what caused our co-founders, Ariel and Alon, to start Navan. They had absolutely no industry experience, but they knew that it was miserable traveling like a road warrior and having no tech. They like to say they went from phone to tech, right? We're just kind of changing how things happen. And from the start, they leveraged AI and machine learning to be at the forefront of solving the hardest use cases. I mean, you probably know that when you're on the road, there's nothing worse than feeling like you're alone and all you have is a piece of paper. And I think Navan makes sure that road warriors feel like they're never alone and that they can control and actually improve their experience. We also make finance and operations people happy because we like to save money and time while ensuring that it happens within a control environment, right? It's not a lot of pieces of paper. You can't book a trip unless it's within policy. So it makes your auditors happy and it makes the CFO happy when you're saving money on that very large line item. When I first joined the company, I was blown away by the number of people that reached out to me, not just to say congratulations for joining Navan, but to say, congratulations, I love this product, right? It's truly, truly beloved. Um, I will say that now that I use the product, I have even greater appreciation for what I call the magic. So I remember the first time I was checking out of a hotel room and they sent me an email with the receipt. Now, normally what you're doing, right, is you're either putting in an email, you're printing it out, or you have that crumpled piece of paper in the bottom of your bag that you then come back to the office with. All of a sudden, I got this beautiful noise on my phone. It said, your receipt is all uploaded, and it was already in. Or I remember the first time that I went to a lunch while I was on a trip. I was taking a client out to lunch, and I used my Navan card, right? And all of a sudden, it connected to my calendar and it said, there you go. Your lunch with this person on this trip has been recorded. And there's a magic that comes with not feeling like you have the stress of all those pieces of papers when you go home. And I will tell you, as a CFO, I love it because I know that my employees are in policy even before they go on that trip. So I don't have to worry about expenses not being tracked and getting surprised by it in the future.
The business press has last year published more than a few articles speculating about an IPO in 2025 for Navan. I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask that. Instead, I'll ask it this way. Can you reflect a little on capital strategies or market expansions for Navan going forward? What would you share with us?
So As someone who believes in the public capital markets and someone who's taken companies public before, I think that's adequate speculation. The way I would like to respond, Jack, is that there are few companies that will benefit from all. Let me say it another way. What I would say is the Navan is well positioned to benefit for all the reasons you might go public, right? So what are some of the benefits? It's an incredible branding opportunity, right? To go out and tell your story both to customers as well as prospective customers. To going public is an incredible opportunity to have a lower cost of capital or access lower cost of capital. It's an incredible opportunity to have an acquisition currency that you can use as you look to grow and expand. And then I think finally, going public serves as an impetus for maturation, right? It's much easier as a CFO to suggest you need processes and controls, right? um, when there's a mission, there's a reason for it. What is that forcing function? And an IPO can definitely be that for an entire organization.
Well, I want to find out a little bit about your lines of sight into the organization. Navan is a tech-driven, solution, a tech-driven company. Can you reflect maybe a little for us how your past experience translates to supporting this type of this digital platform, this digital organization?
So, in many ways, Navan is a similar story of kind of trading technology, right? How does it go from traditional paper and pen and a phone to kind of happening in the future that creates efficiency, better markets, better user experience, et cetera. So it's kind of repeating some of the lessons of the past. And so Ariel and Alan and Navan are doing this in the world of travel. That's where the transformation is. And, I'm sure you're a history buff too, where you can find plenty examples of industries that have gone through transformation or disruption because of technology. I think the first disruption for Navan was simply moving from phone to online and app so that you kind of have that control and that experience in your hand rather than feeling helpless when you're trying to get a customer support person on the line. And it takes a really long time, especially if you're kind of trapped because the flight just got canceled, right? And there are only so many seats left on the next one. But I think Navan is really good about even going to the next level. We've used machine learning since the beginning to make sure that we understand our users, right? We will know, like, for example, they know that I like to take a certain airline. I like a certain seat. I like a certain hotel. And that's what we present to people. And I think where the company is going is both continued transformation for people who aren't on a product like ours, and two, leveraging more AI to make that frequent traveler experience even better.
And that's an area we've been speaking to finance leaders about, AI, of course, and how you communicate the possibilities to your stakeholders, to the analysts as you begin to better educate them about the value Navan can bring organizations. Can you share with us what are the types of questions you're now being asked that 2 years ago CFOs probably were not being asked about AI? They are today because they're all digging in and trying to understand better the AI capabilities and how they bring value. Can you reflect on that? Is that something you've encountered? Tougher questions?
Jack, I love this question. I'll tell you why I love this question, because Navan is a company that isn't just talking about it, they're already doing it. And that's a big differentiator in the market, right? So because we've used AI since the beginning, we have information to make a customer or traveler's experience even better in terms of our interface with them. We've also actually already expanded our gross margins from mid-50s to mid-70%, leveraging AI, particularly in our customer support Ralph. So, for example, today, over 50% of all of our customer support interactions leverage our AI bot, Ava, right? So Ava can talk to you and solve your problem, can help you change your flight without even talking to a rep, which means it's faster, it's more efficient, and it gives us more scale in what we do. Going forward, as we think about AI, we want to leverage it so we can say, hey, Jack, we see you're going to London. You're ending your trip on Friday. Do you think you might want to stay over a couple days and add a little leisure trip to you, right? And kind of find ways to make that experience even more personal.
Is there a measurement related to Ava, I believe you called it, that finance uses? Like, Ava's up 50%, 20% last quarter. I'm not sure, but it seems like you've developed this AI with a personality all its own. And in conversation, sometimes that's a great way to educate by having AI is alive. It's part of what we do.
Yeah, we watch a couple of things. We watch, what percentage of travel is booked without without an agent, without a person, right? And we're kind of at about 90% can be done on its own. And that means, once again, it's faster. It only takes about 6 minutes on average to book a trip. It's also less expensive for us which means we can put our resources elsewhere. We watch the percentage of support requests that can be solved by Ava, which I just shared with you, which is about 50% today. And the other thing that we watch is a CSAT score, which is client satisfaction. And actually, the difference in CSAT between when people use Ava and when they actually talk to a live agent is very close. It's under 10 points. And so we're really proud that some people actually even get mad when they can't talk to Ava. They like Ava, right? Ava likes them. She knows them, and she gets things done quickly. We actually have even had CEOs say, no, I want to talk to Ava. I don't want to talk to a person.
Well, can you tell us a little bit maybe about your finance organization? Since arriving, did you do anything differently? Did you reorganize it in some way, make a key hire? Anything you can share with us?
Just a little. I am so fortunate that I have been able to attract really incredible people to the organization. There's a woman, Ann Javiscus, who I worked with at the New York Stock Exchange. She had a very storied career in Europe for the last 15 years, came back and was fortunate that she joined me as CAO and SVP as strategic finance. So we actually have more oversight and continuity between the controller function and the FP&A function. She is really my partner and has gained a lot of respect already through the organization. We were able to bring over Allison Rossi from Block to be our treasurer. So she's responsible for treasury, procurement, sustainability, and really just helping us change how we manage our cash, our working capital, and thinking about that capital structure, both pre and post IPO. Been able to, we boomerang back someone to be our CIO. So the CIO now reports into the finance org. I've been able to promote someone to be our head of tax, which is really incredible. Workplaces within our org. And so we've created this energy, I believe, as a finance group where we're really looked at now as a strategic partner to the rest of the organization. There's no more questions like, are these the numbers? These are the numbers and people believe us, right? We're introducing new ways of reading those numbers and sharing those numbers and processes and controls. And it's really impressive, both who I've been able to bring onto my team, but who they've been able to bring onto their team. And it's really a great deal of pride for me to see this organization grow.
One last metric question before we move to our finance strategic moment chapter. Curious about whether there's a metric or a number that you've raised the profile of since your tenure began there. And by that, I mean, did you add a new measurement to the mix? Did you maybe there was a number that you felt was being ignored in some way, and you put it on the dashboard, or you began opening every meeting with a discussion around it. I don't know, but is there some measure or metric that you have raised the profile of since your arrival?
Jack, those are great ideas. I think I'm going to take them to my finance team. I think they're really good. We are actually in the process of one of the first things I did, knowing how important KPIs are, was to go through and say, what are going to be our KPIs? How are we defining them today? Are we doing it on a group basis or just in individual sections of the business? And how do we make sure we have one definition, one approach, and a single source of truth? We are in the process of finishing that right now. One of the metrics that I'm most excited to start using with the organization is net dollar retention. Um, and you're nodding, you know that one. It will be relatively new to the organization. We're actually perfect for it if you think about it. We sell travel, and then we expand our offering to enhance that travel experience. So we land with travel. We can expand into payments, expense, VIP, meetings and events. And so I'm really excited to actually see that combined global number and also start tracking it going forward. It was interesting. I was having a meeting this morning with some of the leadership in the New York office, and we have our sales summit next week. And one of the messages I really want to share with the sales force is that they actually will have the opportunity to have an impact, not just on revenue, but potentially even how investors might view us because of that. And so thinking about NDR, like what more can you sell? What more can you add to the experience so that the churn stays low and that people have a very high satisfaction rating for Navan?
Great insight there for us. Thank you for that. We are up to what we refer to as our finance strategic moment. And I mentioned we're really just looking for a good story, some experience you had along the way, Amy, that you feel really revealed to you that, finance does play this strategic role in business. What would you share with us?
Yeah. One of my favorite moments was when I was named CFO of the New York Stock Exchange. I got this call from my dad. And my dad was a career CPA, like original Arthur Anderson, had his own practice, total number guy. And he called me. He said, let me understand this. You were just named the CFO of the New York Stock Exchange. I said, yeah. He said, you took one accounting class in college. I said, yeah. He said, you took kind of one or two corporate finance classes in, in business school. I said, yeah. He's like, I don't understand it. And I think the message is or was that it's not just about being clinical with numbers, right? It's about being strategic. And in my view, and I tried to explain this to my dad, and now I'll try to explain it to you, numbers are a language to tell a story, right? And, we can think about this as just the accounting is critically important, but the story that those numbers tell is even more important because that's what's going to change the direction of what a company chooses to do with its resources, or that's going to matter to directors and a board and to investors. And so it was really interesting to kind of think finance isn't just about numbers, it's about understanding the language of numbers.
Hey, we wonder when you did step into that CFO role for the first time, and again, I think you had some earlier unit CFO roles or other roles, but at the New York Stock Exchange, what surprised you? Was there something, again, this leadership role suddenly, and it's such a unique organization, so your experience there is rather novel, I think, for finance leaders at large. But this is, tell us something that surprised you, like you didn't understand this is part of the role, is it? News to me. Anything? Yeah.
But I think, for me, connecting with people needs to be a part of the role. it's not just doing the job, it's connecting with people. And so throughout my career, particularly as a research analyst, and that's how I built such a strong network and a strong reputation, whether it was connecting with people on the floor of the exchange or people within the finance function. I think that connecting with people is a key to my success, both professionally and personally.
Well, that's great. And I got to say, I just want to touch on the story you shared about your dad calling you. A wonderful story. And it's so enlightening in my way of thinking that because he grew up in an age or has built his career in an age when CFOs were not all that strategic. And of course, we know this has unfolded over the last 3 decades, really, which is, the span of your career that these, finance leadership has broadened and has needed, which has required new skill sets. How am I doing? Do you believe that's true? And would your father disagree or?
Look, I think he was always a problem solver. That's probably where I get that trait, that problem solving trait. But I agree. I think in the past, it was really just about being a controller or being an accountant. Not that those are bad, but that
No,
was really the expectation.
no.
And so when you think about what that role is today, um, it's really being that leader. I like to say what sets me apart or what I strive to do is thinking 15, 10, 15, 20 steps ahead and figuring out where are the risk and opportunities in those steps? What are the key success factors to getting there? And who are the people who are going to be important to that? And sometimes, if you go back to your traditional view of a CFO or that accountant or that controller, it was somebody that knew everything, right? They were the expert. And what I have found, particularly later in my career, sometimes sharing vulnerability can actually make you more powerful. And it's a little bit of that EQ as well as the IQ. And so, if I bring it back full circle to what I learned at the New York Stock Exchange, which is a lot of CFOs, sometimes feel alone. And sometimes that makes them vulnerable. And so that if you can be in a place, and hopefully I can do that for other CFOs here at Navan as well, because we have a lot of information to share and a lot of things to make them better. If you can find a way to connect and provide value and insight to others, I think that's a really special talent and something I always strive to do.
Yeah, nice. Thank you, Amy. Um, we always like to ask our guests to reflect a little on the personal side, Amy. We're wondering if there's something your colleagues there might not know about you yet. Hasn't been straight a year or 12 months yet, but I'm sure there are a few things they might not know about you. Something from your past, a pursuit, an interest, something most people might not know.
So I am an avid baseball fan. I actually played softball as a pitcher in college. I was not the power pitcher. I was much more the accuracy, low ball, hit a ground ball. But the fact that some people might not know about me was actually I learned how to throw a ball when I was about 4 years old from a baseball player named Jim Perry. He was Gaylord Perry's brother, so he wasn't the spitballer. But he would come over to our house when he was playing in town. He played for the Tigers, the Indians, and the Oakland A's. And he would come over and he would take me out in the back and teach me how to throw a ball. And that started my love of baseball and led me to play baseball with the boys growing up and be a pitcher in college.
Amazing. And wow, what a wonderful memory to have. We're going to finally ask you to look forward. And we know this is perhaps a milestone year. We'll have to talk to you later in the year. But tell us, what are your priorities as a CFO looking forward over the next 12 months?
Sure. My priorities at Navan are making sure that, we are well capitalized, that we are on track for meeting our plan, and that we are maturing as a company. I think ultimately our goal is to find a way to come to the public markets. And I think that we will benefit tremendously from that. And I look forward to leading the company to that goal.
Amy Butte, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, Jack.